So hey
We're
everybody,
back.
we are back. We are back, and my gosh, how amazing that we're in the same shirt with the same button. That's even better. So
Unbelievable.
it's amazing
I
how
have trouble.
that. So I am ready to share the first chapter of Lizzie Albright. The story starts on Christmas Eve. It is 1964. All right.
What
Now,
a great year.
that was Kat's. I have to say that's your idea to do
Yeah.
1964. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
why though. I never really figured that out. So why is it 1964?
I just think it was a great era. There are multiple reasons that I don't want to divulge, but I just love the era of music, the era of decor, the fashion. There were just so many things about that era that are over the top crazy,
It's
and I
not
felt like it
it's
would be
not
a great setting.
it's not in the book, but I just thought these boots are made for walking. In the general,
Totally.
yeah, in the general area there, okay, and a lot of
Yeah.
other fun things that they actually come out in the book. So it is Christmas Eve. It
Yeah.
is 1964, and this is the story of Lizzie Albright as it begins. And Kat and I will visit with you at the end of this chapter. Lizzie Albright in the Attic Window by Ricky Timms and Kat Bowser. Chapter 1. Lizzie didn't mind that her birthday was on Christmas Eve. She simply pretended the whole world was decorated in her honor. She loved the sights, sounds, smells, and flavors of the season. Mrs. Albright always made sure that Lizzie received a proper birthday cake and made sure her birthday gifts and Christmas gifts were kept separate. Lizzie's 10th birthday began this morning when Mr. and Mrs. Albright woke her with a vibrant rendition of Happy Birthday. "Happy birthday, dear Lizzie. Happy birthday to you," they sang. Lizzie rubbed her eyes, sat up in her canopy bed, and said, "Is it really? I forgot all about it." Of course, she hadn't forgotten about her birthday at all. She wasn't even asleep when her parents came into her room, even though she pretended to be. Lizzie loved special events and always waited for them with great anticipation. She tried to keep her excitement to herself, but there was no hiding it. She had been so excited that last night, before bed, her stomach was full of butterflies. "Do you want to open your gifts now or after lunch?" Mrs. Albright asked. I'll wait," Lizzie responded. Although she really wanted to open them right away, she chose to delay opening the presents in order to make the birthday part of her day last a little longer. She knew that soon enough the family would be driving to Granny's house for their annual Christmas gathering, and her birthday would be overshadowed by the trip. "I made your favorite chocolate cake. We can have it after lunch. I made enough to take some to Granny's, too. We'll celebrate twice today." Lizzie liked the sound of a double celebration. She decided she would try to fall asleep on the ride to Granny's, and upon waking, she would pretend it was a completely new day, making her the only one in the world with a 2-day birthday. "I see you started packing things," Mrs. Albright said, spotting the half-full suitcase on the floor next to Lizzie's bed. "Let me know if you need any help," she said, knowing full well that Lizzie prided herself on being able to pack her own suitcase since she had turned 6 and wouldn't be asking for any assistance. Mr. and Mrs. Albright left her room, and she heard her father shout down the hallway, "Doug, Allen, up and at 'em! Time's a-wastin'!" Although Lizzie had laid out many items before she went to bed, there were still a few things left to be considered. She would, of course, be taking Fluffs, a larger-than-life stuffed rabbit that Lizzie's Aunt Rachel had given to her on her 2nd birthday and had been her constant companion ever since. He had extra long ears, a few patches where his fur had worn thin, and a broken seam along his back that Granny had helped repair. He was also missing an eye. On more than one occasion, Lizzie had fashioned an eye patch for Fluffs and pretended that the two of them were off sailing in a pirate ship, looking for deserted islands and hidden treasure. All things considered, Fluffs was in pretty good shape. Though Lizzie didn't play with Fluffs as much as she used to, he slept beside her, and she never left him behind when she went on a trip. He was a comfort. Having him close made Lizzie feel safe. She imagined that he felt the same about her, and that they would miss each other desperately if they were separated for any length of time. Lizzie picked up Fluffs, wound the little key on his belly, and the music box inside began to softly play Brahms' Lullaby. She walked over to her bookshelf and began reading the titles on the spines, trying to decide which book to take with her. She glanced past Charlotte's Web, Aesop's Fables, and her collection of Dr. Seuss books, which had arrived regularly by mail when she was younger. None of these would do. She considered Rumpelstiltskin, King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. She then pulled The Wonderful Wizard of Oz from the shelf. She flipped through the pages, looking at the illustrations and reflecting. Since Lizzie was born in Kansas, The Wizard of Oz was one of her favorite stories. She never missed the annual presentation of The Wizard of Oz on television. Since the movie started at 6 o'clock, it was a family tradition to have dinner in the living room. Mrs. Albright would make tuna melt sandwiches and mac and cheese served on TV trays. This was one of the few times dinner was allowed in the living room. Mr. Albright was in charge of making popcorn, which he always did about the time Dorothy met Scarecrow in the cornfield. Even though Lizzie knew the entire story, when the scene in the haunted forest began, she would crawl up next to her dad. The lingering scent of his Old Spice cologne reminded her that she was safe at home, and that this was just a story, and that there were no haunted forests in the real world. Watching The Wizard of Oz in 1962 was the most memorable of all. That was the year when the Albrights bought their first color television. They watched with great anticipation for the moment when Dorothy landed in Munchkinland and the dismal black and white of the previous scenes turned into magical and vibrant Technicolor. Last year, after the movie had aired, Lizzie was at her school's library and stumbled across a book titled The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Could it be? Lizzie thought. Nobody had ever told her that the movie had first been a book. She immediately checked it out and devoured it that weekend. She noted the differences between the book and the movie, but she loved the story and the characters so much that to her, the book and the movie were both wonderful. She had received her own copy for her birthday last year. Lizzie closed the book and put it back on the shelf. Not this time, she thought to herself. After scanning the bookshelf again, her eye came to rest on a particular favorite. Alice in Wonderland, Lizzie said out loud. Yes. Lizzie had read Alice in Wonderland twice when she was only 8 years old. To Lizzie, Wonderland was more of a real place than a fantasy land. She loved to create makeshift costumes and act out scenes from her books. Once she used the foil from a used Jiffy Pop popcorn container to make the perfect crown for her role as Queen of Hearts. She then spent the rest of the day going up to her brothers and saying, "Off with his head!" She removed the book from the shelf and placed it next to Fluff's on the bed. She then glanced at her calendar hanging on the wall over her desk and double-checked the number of days she would be gone in order to make sure she had packed enough clothes. Her wardrobe for all the days between Christmas and New Year's had to be sorted out and coordinated. She placed her pillow on the bed next to the suitcase and then folded up the snuggle quilt that Granny had made for her when she started first grade. Granny had taken Lizzie to the local craft store to select the fabrics for the quilt. Most of the fabrics she picked out were pinks and purples. Granny told her that the quilt featured the rail fence pattern, but Lizzie never thought it looked much like any fence she had ever seen. The quilt was showing signs of being well loved, but it was not tattered. After everything was packed, Lizzie spent the rest of the morning in the family room watching TV with Doug and Alan. Regular programming was suspended, and reruns of holiday specials were being broadcast. Television viewing hours for the kids were normally limited to just a few shows in the evening, but since it was the Christmas break from school, Mr. and Mrs. Albright didn't mind the kids enjoying a little more time in front of the tube. So one of the things that I love about Lizzie in that chapter is just basically seeing her room. I mean, I can only imagine it's your bedroom when you were a kid. You must have had stuffed animals everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And the other thing is I love the fact that we learn about her ability to, her love of reading, that she has a nice library in her room. And then also, I remember, I don't know, Kat, I mean, you're younger than I am, but I loved the annual every year Wizard of Oz. And we watched it on the black and white TV. And when I was a little kid, my aunt and uncle lived across the street, and they got a color TV. And this was the year I was going to get to watch it go from black and white to color. And I'll never forget that. Because I didn't see it in the theaters. You know, it wasn't playing. It was on TV on CBS.
Yeah, I can remember every year that event. I mean, it was we'd talk about it at school. We'd get all excited about it. We'd come home. Mom would have a special meal plan where we'd even get to maybe sit in the family room at the TV and eat and watch The Wizard of Oz, all of us together. It really was a major event every year. And if you missed it, you know, you had to wait a whole other year to see it again.
Oh, that's great.
So you were out of luck.
Yeah, and then, of course, Fluffs. I don't know if Fluffs is from your brain as a real thing, but I had a dog, a stuffed dog that I got when I was 2 years old, and he was kind of large, and his name was Lazy. He had floppy ears, and his name was Lazy, and he had a little wind-up music box in his belly. So I don't know if you had one with the back.
I think we came up with that character because both of us had a stuffed animal with a wind-up. My first stuffed animal was a bear as a baby with a wind-up box,
And so, of course, and so here we are. We're moving into the birthday day, where we end up, you know, loving Lizzie and her love for Alice in Wonderland and all of that. And they're going to get to have limited hours at the TV because this is the '60s, and you know, it's just
that's right.
You know, we didn't have smartphones and devices and internet and all that kind of stuff, so it was crazy different.
Yeah, but thankfully we do now.
We do. Now, in Chapter 2, what's coming up, we're going to have a little more birthday party. We're going to get a little more excited about the 60s, and we're going to learn a little bit more about the family in Chapter 2. So people will want to definitely tune in for Chapter 2, which will be coming up, I don't know. It'll post soon. Stay tuned.